Connection. We're a national nonprofit dedicated to addressing youth homelessness through education. We provide strategic advocacy and practical assistance in partnership with schools, early childhood programs, higher education institutions, service providers, families, and youth, including many of those with lived experience. I am the director of state policy, which means I get to work with folks around the country to figure out solutions to policy reform that addresses education related challenges that youth experiencing homelessness have to deal with. Schoolhouse provides a tremendous amount of resources on our website, and I encourage you all to visit schoolhouseconnection.org. There you'll find more information about our federal and state policy advocacy, information that's shared between McKinney-Vento liaisons across the country in our Q&A toolkit, webinars that are archived that include everything from training resources to educational resources to issue-related information, and more information about our Youth Leadership and Scholarship Program, which is an initiative at Schoolhouse, through which we provide scholarships to youth who are entering higher education, and we support them as they navigate their way through. Today, I'm joined by a group of fellows who will talk about some of the work that they've done in federal advocacy to help address youth homelessness. The Schoolhouse Connection Policy Fellows initiative is designed to use the expertise of people who work with youth experiencing homelessness as allies and advocates to engage in conversations with elected officials at the federal level and in some cases at the state level to help us with policy reform work that we're doing. We are on our second cohort of fellows. We currently have 14 fellows from 7 states who've engaged in a series of conversations with their congressional representatives' offices to advocate for 3 priorities, which I'm going to talk to you about a little bit later, and I'll have them I'll provide them an opportunity to talk about the work that they've done specifically. Starting with Woody Crowbar, who I'll allow to unmute and introduce himself.
Yeah, my name is Woody Crowbar. I am the Help Program Coordinator working out of Lincoln County School District. We're a school district out on the Oregon coast with a student population of about 5,000 students across 15 schools. And at the end of last year, 754 students qualified as McKinney-Vento in our district. So, you know, kind of hovers every year between about 10 to 15% of our district.
Thank you, Woody. Next up is Andrea.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be with you all today. My name is Andrea Shaver, and I'm joining you from Douglas County, Oregon, which, as you can see on the map on the slide, is one of the largest counties west of the Cascades, spanning over 5,000 square miles and stretching from the mountains to the Pacific coastline. I'm a regional McKinney-Vento resource specialist for the Douglas Education Service District. This is a new role here at Douglas ESD, and I'm excited to help support the hard and challenging work of the McKinney-Vento liaisons in our rural county. I'm thankful to be able to bring my previous experience from the Sutherland School District, where over the last 7 years, we developed a program to provide community resource navigation, education, and support to families and youth in our small district of 1,300 students, including those experiencing homelessness and involvement with the child welfare system. Within the last 3 years, because of the commitment Sutherland School District had for this role, they went from identifying and reducing educational barriers for under 3% to now over 8% of their student body population as they experience homelessness. Due to the lack of funding, especially in rural areas, there is only one school district in Douglas County that has a person full-time to focus on supporting our children and youth experiencing homelessness. Because each school district is required by law to have a McKinney-Vento liaison, it is common for the liaison to also hold other positions within their district, and sometimes even multiple positions. Through my new role here at Douglas ESD, I'm excited to be working with 14 school districts that support over 13,000 children and youth. My focus will be to walk alongside the McKinney-Vento liaisons to help support them in various ways unique to their district objectives. This can be anything from helping provide staff and community education, capacity building, developing or updating current systems to identify, refer, and support McKinney-Vento eligible youth, or just to be someone the liaisons can call to troubleshoot a situation. Anybody that's been involved with McKinney-Vento knows there are a lot of gray areas in some of these situations. I want to take a moment to thank SchoolHouse Connection for their mentorship in the Policy Fellowship Program. Learning how to advocate on the legislative level on behalf of our students is a great honor and responsibility. It's been exciting to step out of my comfort zone and discuss the importance of our 3 priorities with our senators and representatives on a national level and with you here today.
Thank you for those kind words. And we honestly are better for your participation in this because of the incredible expertise that all of you bring. And next up is Kirsten.
I am Kirsten Doberry. I am from Klamath Falls City Schools, which is in the rural county of Southern Oregon in Klamath County. I serve approximately between 2,100 and 2,300 students district-wide between 13 different schools, varying from the ages of 0 all the way up to 18, even up to 21. We have very limited resources since we are a rural county. And so it becomes a challenge to support the youth sometimes and the families, but we all make do and we try and figure out the best resources we have available.
Thank you as well, Kirsten. So today we're going to go over issues related to student homelessness. And we'll talk about the priorities that we are advocating for and some things that you can do to help. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature to submit those questions, or if you have difficulty doing that, feel free to drop them in the chat. We will try to review and answer those questions. We are going to pause a couple times during the presentation to take questions as well. So across the country, there are about 1.2 million students experiencing homelessness as identified by public schools in data that is collected by the U.S. Department of Education. This is an undercount in our view because many schools report challenges identifying and communicating with students experiencing homelessness for a variety of reasons. And our panelists have experienced this themselves. And if any of you want to weigh in on that, please feel free to do so.
I kind of mentioned it in my introduction. In rural areas, a lot of times our McKinney-Vento liaison, which is a state-funded mandate, a state mandate that's unfunded, excuse me, here in Douglas County, we haven't received any funds from the state historically. We did receive some ARP or American Rescue Plan funds, but not all of our districts did. 6 of our school districts did not receive that. And with those funds, it helps create capacity for us to be able to identify and serve those youth. Without that support, our staff are challenged with being understaffing issues, and then also just they are needing to serve other roles in our school district, such as being superintendent or the special ed teacher, or they're wearing multiple hats, which makes it really hard to dive in and do this work.
Thank you, Andrea. So homelessness looks different from community to community. And one of the challenges when it comes to effectively addressing youth homelessness is that a lot of folks in positions of power, those people who have the ability to do something about it, don't really understand what youth homelessness looks like. It can be youth and families staying in a motel or staying with other people following an eviction, or staying at a shelter, or what we call couch surfing, moving from house to house, or living doubled up or tripled up. If you look at the data regarding some of these issues in the state of Oregon, you'll see that there are about 18,485 youth experiencing homelessness that we know about. And when it comes to some of those situations I just referred to, you'll see that about 13% of these individuals are unsheltered. About 10% are in shelters. About 7% are using hotels or motels, and about 70% of them are living doubled up or tripled up. And from the data that's available to us, there, as you can see at the bottom, are about 1,100 youth experiencing homelessness as unaccompanied minors. But this is a fraction of what we think is the total population, because the data we have is so hard to collect. And what we lift up here is information that is pulled from the FAFSA application. So it's those minors who are leaving high school. We know that the population of unaccompanied youth includes a lot of those younger children, and those figures aren't captured here. I mentioned SchoolHouse's commitment to addressing youth homelessness through education, because we feel education is the greatest way to ensure that youth escape homelessness and are able to thrive as adults. You'll see that 42% of students who are experiencing homelessness say they drop out of school at least once, and 60% say it's hard to stay in school while they're homeless because of the issues regarding moving around and everything that comes with that. Homelessness is associated with an 87% likelihood of dropping out of school, being chronically absent, or facing school discipline in disproportionate rates. Over time, achievement gaps between homeless and low income students tend to persist and may even worsen from the time students are early in their education in elementary school and continuing as they progress in the K-12 system. Lack of a high school diploma or GED is the single greatest risk factor for youth who are moving into adult stages. So those young adult homeless individuals, it makes it 346% more likely. More than 2/3 of jobs require some form of post-secondary education. And so we try to do all we can to support those youth from an early age as they move through the system and into higher education, to do everything we can to support them getting that education, because we know how critical it is to their success later on in life. The McKinney-Vento Act is an important way that educators get the support necessary to help students and eventually assist them as they strive to overcome homelessness. McKinney-Vento provides rules that help address some of the more significant barriers students face, including keeping students in their school of origin, which is critical as disruptions in housing tend to result in students and their families moving around frequently. Helping to address some of the challenges with transportation that students face as they and their families are forced to move around frequently. Providing immediate enrollment for those youth who may not be able to stay, or whose families don't want them to stay in those schools of origin and they want to change schools. It provides them that immediate enrollment necessary to make sure they are resuming their education as quickly as possible. And assisting students as they deal with all those challenges related to moving around so frequently and accumulating the credits necessary to graduate. So who is eligible? McKinney-Vento defines youth homelessness as children and youth who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence. This includes, as I referred to earlier, some of those who may be sharing housing due to those issues that result in their families losing their housing, economic hardship, and other reasons, or those living in motels, hotels, trailer parks, camping grounds, and so forth. And I also mentioned previously those who are living in emergency and transitional shelters, or who are living in public or private spaces that are not really qualified, or that are not truly fit for habitation, or who are simply living in their cars or parks or wherever they can find to take shelter at night. So we covered quite a bit of territory. We're going to take a brief pause to see if we have questions. I don't see any submitted so far, which must mean we're doing a great job of covering this material. We'll pat ourselves on the back. So I also referenced at the top that we have been advocating, along with our policy fellows, for a series of priorities at the federal level that include ensuring that there is more federal support for flexible funding to support the great work educators do across the country to support children and youth experiencing homelessness, that we have more resources to help address the barriers to higher education for homeless and foster youth, and that we reform the homelessness assistance being provided to better meet the needs of children, youth, and families. I'm going to allow our policy fellows to talk about some of the work that they've done relative to each of these priorities.
So during our meetings with Senator Wyden's team, Merkley's team, and I met with Rep Bence's team, because that's who my rep is for. We talked to his team about the flexible funding, the ARP funding, and how it would be beneficial for that funding to stay around long term because of how restricted sometimes the federal money can be, and why we are seeing a need for that flexible funding more and more. A lot of the things we talked about was a lot of districts nationwide use that funding for staffing purposes. So come September of 24, we might be seeing a lot of staff layoffs because there's no funding available to fund those jobs anymore in those positions. We also talked about doubling the capacity with the senators' teams and the representatives' teams of being able to double our capacity for identifying. We all know that these families hide. They're really hard sometimes to find. And so by doubling our capacity to find those children and find the families and get them the services that they need to help them get back on their feet has been helpful tremendously and very, very much needed. As you have heard, it's harder in the rural communities, as most of you guys know. It's hard to support those students in the rural communities when we only have so many resources available. So by having the flexible spending, it's allowed us to open doors that we didn't have before. So by advocating with the senators and the representatives, we were able to talk to them and get their teams to understand why the spending is so valuable for all of us in this position versus why we could use it coming forward and going on and on.
And Kirsten, what was your biggest takeaway from your meeting with Congress people?
The biggest takeaway I took away from meeting with the senators and the representatives and the teams was that they were appreciative of our info because we were boots on the ground. We are the boots on the ground. We are the faces that the students and the families see every day. We're the voices that they talk to most of the time. So they were happy to hear of our experiences and of our needs of the families, of the students. and why we are using the flexible spending and how we're using the flexible spending to allow us to serve more families and youth.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that, because a lot of folks don't really understand, if they haven't had the experience in engaging their Congress members, the power they have in just talking about the work that they do with the population that's impacted by the issue. So that's priority one. We also have been advocating for the Higher Education Access and Success for Homeless and Foster Youth Act, which is a mouthful, so we refer to it as HEFI. And it's about providing greater support to those homeless and foster youth moving into higher education that I referenced earlier.
So I was part of advocating for this position with our senators and representatives. HEFI, we like our acronyms in education, don't we? That's a mouthful for sure. So Mr. Mons, you had a data point that I had not heard before when you were presenting earlier, and that is 2/3 of the jobs require post-secondary education. I had no idea it was that much. And as we work through our processes and understand that moving upstream is so helpful in stemming off a negative result, being able to help youth experiencing homelessness gain access to post-secondary education is so valuable in the trajectory that they'll have moving forward in their lives. So some of the points of this one is we want to move people out of poverty, reduce barriers to livable wages, help people have an opportunity to live healthy and productive lives. This would help transition from high school to colleges. So as you think about soft handoffs, I have a youth that I worked with in the past who had great support at our high school level. His history was really challenging, and those supports were so valuable. And then he graduated, and those supports go on summer break, and rightfully so, they're exhausted. But that transition piece between high school and college really created a situation where he was unable to obtain his school of choice and the school he actually had scholarships at. Trying to find housing during the summer or during breaks when you do not have housing or even a soft place to land is very challenging in being able to keep kids in school. Colleges want to help kids get their FAFSA done. It's a really important tool for them. They can be involved in summer programs. And one of the points that we talked a lot about with our senators and representatives is being able to soft hand off to a college in a different location. We might know the resources in our current areas, but when somebody goes off to college, there's resources needed there as well. And we can't be the professionals in that area. We need to hand them off to people who know how to connect these youth with summer programs, different living supports, social supports. We feel like that would be very beneficial for our students.
And Andrea, what do you think surprised the Congress members most as you talk to them about things that they could do to help the young people who are impacted by homelessness?
This Senate bill, which is, let's see, I have it here somewhere, Senate bill, I think it's 3616, has bipartisan support. And so I think what we experienced when we were presenting these positions was a lot of, yes, we'd love to do this, but where's the money? You know, where's that going to come from? How are we going to support that? And so we just hope that the pressure from all of us here in Oregon to move our representatives in a direction to sign on to this and support this will be so helpful.
Thank you. And I'll just point out, we're currently advocating for a reintroduction of HEFI. It was introduced last session, and now we're trying to bring it back. Andrea mentioned there's bipartisan support for it. So we think we have a good chance of having it reintroduced in coming months. And the challenge will be, as she alluded to, eventually finding a way to fund it. And I will turn it over to Woody to talk about our third priority, which involves a bill that actually has been introduced and has bipartisan support.
Yeah. So I kind of focused my advocacy work on this topic here, HR 5221, and that is about amending the definition of homelessness on the federal level so that HUD's definition of homelessness and the McKinney-Vento definition of homelessness would be more aligned. In other words, if a program working in a school identified a student and their family as homeless, then HUD would also consider that family to be homeless. As it exists right now, there are two different definitions for that between organizations, and that can create a lot of issues in navigating systems and getting people connected to resources. On our side, as McKinney-Vento liaisons, there are families that we would want to be able to refer, to be able to help sign up for some of these resources that even though they would qualify under us, they don't qualify under organizations, other organizations. And this would be a big step towards fixing that. And the other big thing that this would do in light of that is to improve the accuracy of talking about what homelessness looks like in different areas of Oregon and different areas of the country. A lot of the discussions centered on homelessness tend to focus on large urban areas. It tends to focus on the visible side of what homelessness looks like. And the thing is, there's a lot of invisible homelessness out there. It is the folks who are staying with family members because they have nowhere else to go. It's the folks who are in an RV and they're kind of secure, but they still have to bounce around between campgrounds. And if we're looking at amending the definition so that it includes that wider range, we're going to get a much better idea of what this issue looks like on that state and national level, and then how we can better address it. In particular, I would say, all three of us kind of on this thing here as these fellows, we're all from rural districts. So like our resources aren't there. Like there's a lot of things we lack in our areas. And so it can be much different for us to use systems that are supposed to identify folks experiencing homelessness if those were designed for big cities where some of those things are more common.
Yeah, and I'm glad you addressed that issue specifically, Woody, because one of the challenges that I've seen in this work is that people tend to think that homelessness is just an urban issue and don't understand the challenges that folks working on youth homelessness in rural areas have to deal with, or what those homeless families and the youth in those families really look like when it comes to identifying those populations in rural areas. In your congressional engagement, was that something that resonated with the Congress members and their staffs?
Yes, I definitely think it was kind of being able to talk about the entire areas they represent. You know, homelessness has definitely been a big subject of discussion in Oregon specifically in the last few years. The governor had the emergency declaration on homelessness last year and the funding that went into that. And kind of being able to say that it's not just an urban issue, it's an entire state issue, and it's a nationwide issue. And
Right.
that's really how we need to go about addressing it. And I think that did really resonate.
Thank you.
It was kind of interesting as we were meeting with one of the senators. They were in full support of this. However, the hesitation seemed to be around, well, if we change the definition, HUD's definition to include McKinney-Vento's definition of homeless, then an already taxed system will not be able to handle the increase in identification. The pushback to that, which we learned through this policy program, is it still doesn't mean they're not homeless or experiencing homelessness. So being able to identify is important and valuable. So we have a real clear picture of what's happening with our students and families.
Thank you for that. And we do have a couple of questions that have been submitted. I'll take the second one first. Cheyenne, I'm going to get to what you can do to help support this initiative in just a moment. Thank you for that question. But I think it may be best for someone from the McKinney-Vento world to take the first one. I'll give you all a chance to read that through.
Is it possible to unmute someone else on this call? I do work with a colleague who works in this setting that could answer this incredibly.
Sure. Who is that?
That's going to be Leslie Rogers. Hope I don't put him on the spot here.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Yeah, this question is really pertinent to what I do. I do a lot of work supporting families that are navigating the disability services system in Oregon. And what's going on right now is there was a policy during the public health emergency during COVID that allowed for paid parents. That policy ended, paid parent caregivers. And as that policy ended, families were thrown, especially single parents, were thrown back into, you can't find childcare. As hard as it is to find childcare with a child that doesn't experience significant disability, it's impossible if your child does experience significant disability. And so, I think what this question is getting at is how can we work together with this community to get upstream? That's what I see here, kind of what Andrea was saying, like, how do we get upstream to let policymakers know, like, hey, this change you're about to do is going to have a detrimental impact on the community and lead to more children experiencing homelessness. Often these children end up in, right now there's not available foster beds, so they usually end up in emergency rooms and sit there until either the parent can get housing again or they find a foster family for them. So anyway, I don't know, I'm interested to see what you all think as well, but my answer would be to work with the organizations in the state, like the Oregon Council on Developmental Disabilities, and make sure policymakers know that these changes are coming. The needs assessment is changing as well in Oregon and significantly reducing support hours for children, is my experience.
Thank you, Les. I would say from a McKinney-Vento standpoint too, I mean, outside of the advocacy work, a McKinney-Vento liaison is helping to reduce educational barriers to youth in their school districts. So that is such a big issue. Definitely want to advocate for that. But as the liaisons in school districts, it's just making sure those kiddos have access to their education, have access to their schools of origin, whether they're in foster or in hospitals. And I have heard that before. Les and I work closely, and it's very sad to hear some of those realities.
Did any of our other panelists want to weigh in?
And yeah, I guess to echo what Andrea said a little bit, part of McKinney-Vento and foster care support in school districts that we work in is helping remove those barriers to education. So if we're having a student come in and we are seeing those barriers, the things like we're talking about here, like flexible funding, having the capacity to work on assessments on the school district side and do the evaluations to say, we think that these are the best policies and the best supports that this student is going to get. That is then that a way for us to connect back to those services and advocate on our end that that's the best thing for those kids.
It's a great question to the poster. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So as it relates to that second question that I took first, one of the reasons that we're here today, we like to try to recruit as many of you who may be interested to help us with education and advocacy. And December and January is a great time to do that. It's really important, given the makeup of our current Congress, that we engage both Republicans and Democrats. I included some data here just to show you how evenly divided both the House and the Senate are. The Democrats control the White House and the Senate, and the Republicans have a slim majority in the House. So no matter what party affiliation your Congress member has, they are important and can be an ally in this work. We, as we mentioned before, are working on legislation that is bipartisan. So the ask that we are recruiting allies to help us make is to talk to representatives and senators about supporting robust, flexible funding for students experiencing homelessness in the upcoming fiscal year, and to support the reintroduction of HESH and to consider signing on as a sponsor or co-sponsor. Woody mentioned the Homeless Children and Youth Act already being introduced. It's HR 5221. More information will be included in this follow-up message that you'll get after our webinar on that bill specifically. But we are asking for Congress members to sign on as co-sponsors and to encourage their colleagues to do so. You should know that there is one Congress member from Oregon who's already signed on to the bill, Representative Suzanne Bonamici from Beaverton is a co-sponsor of 5221 so far. There are 15 Congress members who've signed on. So those are our three asks. And as I mentioned, you'll get more information in that follow-up message to help better equip you all to help in that. And I'm going to pause briefly to see if there are any more questions. I think we got one more. Oh, yeah. So there's one who signed on, Leslie, and that's Representative Bonamici, and there are no others. So we need the rest of the delegation to step up and to sign on. And if that is it, all right, I'll just keep going. So to see if your member has signed on at any point or to get more information about the bill, you can go to congress.gov. You can type in HR 5221, or you can type in HESH and you can get more information on the version of the bill that was introduced last session. It'll be reintroduced this session in similar form. I'll also include the bill number in the follow-up email so you can look that up specifically. We also encourage you to check out your members on social media, your senator and your senators and your rep. It's a great way to see what they are up to and to reach out to them as well with the ask. We also provide you support in better equipping you on each of the three priorities and providing any training and support that you might need if you, in fact, are interested in making a legislative visit at some point. To find out more about our work, we'll encourage you to sign up for our newsletter or check out our federal policy page or email me directly And I'm happy to provide anything that you might need to help you stay up to date on this work, as well as other work in which we are involved. And quick and easy way to sign up if you're interested in being involved in what we're calling our advocacy network is to scan the QR code here. And we can help, as I mentioned, get you prepared to reach out to your Congress member. And some of those resources, in addition to training, include the materials on the issues and talking points so that you're prepared to have an effective and impactful conversation. And with that said, I will check one more time for questions, and seeing none, I will take this opportunity on behalf of our policy fellows from Oregon, Kirsten, Andrea, and Woody, to thank you for joining us today. We hope that you learned something that might energize you to do more to help youth and young adults experiencing homelessness, and that you might consider joining us in the work that we're doing at the federal and state levels. And if any of our fellows wanted to say something before we signed off, feel free to unmute yourself and do so.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you for everyone for coming. It was great to have you all here. And yeah, anything you can do to help support these efforts would be greatly appreciated.
All right. Thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day.